Item 6 is public comment. I think we have anybody signed up to speak. So then we'll go to item 7, presentation and discussion of the updated report by the Director of Electric Utilities or his designee regarding customer service, business center practice, procedures and policies, customer concerns and complaints, website information, customer metering, billing forms, and procedures, and LPL staffing and performance. Mr. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 15, I want to call your attention to our reliability graph there. Third chart down on the right-hand side. A year ago, in April, is when we had the major outage at our McDonald's substation that caused an extensive outage, and so that one has rolled off of the 12-month rolling average statistics now, so you can see a major dip in our annual 12-month annual average reliability statistics. So we're down around 45 minutes per year per customer now, which is well under target. You know, our target is generally about 53. That's generally perceived to be when customers, if you're below that, customers think you've got good reliability. If you're above that, reliability is not what it should be. So we're down below that now. So I wanted to call that to your attention. And we, of course, hadn't had very many thunderstorms this past 12 months, so that's effectively positively affected our reliability because a lot of outages occur when you have lightning windstorms. On page 17, another good month of meter reading, error rates down below our target level. Really good job by Andy and his team to get our meter reading back where it should be. I wanted to mention also that Mr. Bell noticed we've got a greeter in the lobby now. That's something that is a recent addition, and I want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've assigned someone. We're rotating folks through there right now to help folks with the kiosks in the lobby, and so a lot of folks see the cashier stand behind the counter, and that's easy. And so we've been trying to get people out of the line to come and show them how the kiosks work. You know, hopefully over time we can have deploy those kiosks around the city, and people will be comfortable with them and we can use them. Another thing that I know Jamie and her group have been working on is, I don't know if you've been to DPS, and you can log in when you walk in, and there'll be a screen up above that will let you know when it's your turn. And they've gotten a relatively simple system and are installing it. It'll be probably ready pretty soon. That for folks who are coming in to speak with a representative, sometimes there can be quite a wait. And we used to have a little pull a number, and then they'd have to figure out what's the next number. So we have a system in place now that will make it a lot. We will have a system in place. They're still getting it installed, but there's some things we're doing in the lobby to help ease the customer as they come and make their stop a little bit shorter and easier to handle when they're here.
Well, I was by yesterday, as I said, and today, and both of the people greeters there were very professional, very friendly.
Good.
And I introduced myself this morning to the young woman that was there, and asked her how it was going. But anyway, it was a really cool deal.
She didn't convince you to use the kiosk? She didn't persuade you to use the kiosk?
No, I don't use the kiosk. I use the internet.
The kiosk is also available in the drive-thru now. I don't know if you've noticed that. We'll be having signage put up that really highlights the kiosk in the near future. So that'll be a little bit more noticeable once all that's put into place. But, so that way, now anybody can 24 hours a day can make their payment. And for those folks who have to be at work from 8 to 5 when our lobby's open, they have another option now that they can pay their bill and do it through the drive-thru. We still have
to make change.
It doesn't make change. Other than that,
We'll give you credit.
yeah.
I don't use it, so.
So the commercial construction report on page 21 starts on page 21. We had 11 completed activities this month: motel, retail, and restaurant sites were completed this month. And we had 7 new additions to the list there. You can see on page 24. And then I was going to talk about a few other things that are not in the written report. We met with ERCOT on May 4th. We had 2 meetings with ERCOT. One of them was in the morning, and in the morning meeting, we talked about registration, action items that need to happen for us to integrate with ERCOT compliance activities. We had a team from LPNL that went there and met with all the principals, people that we'll be dealing with over the next few years as we integrate with ERCOT. So that was really a good kickoff meeting we had with those folks. On the opt-in study, we received 4 proposals to the study. The review team has completed our analysis, and we've narrowed it down to 2 finalists that Mr. Orton will be arranging interviews with. So we're moving forward on the study, getting that started. We've got open houses coming up May 19th, which is a Saturday morning at Urban Elementary. Another open house May 23rd at Miller. And of course, this will be similar to what we did last year, where we have all the utilities around the room with setups, and customers can, if they want to look at their bill and explain anything to them about how their bill works or how their cost is calculated. We have representatives there that can do that. We also have added an energy efficiency booth. Mr. Moon will be out there at the booth for energy efficiency. He's got a light bulb demonstration to show the difference between incandescent and LED lights. So I think that'll be a big hit. We've had a number of public meetings over the last few weeks. Matt has done some of them. I've done some of them. Most recent one was most recent meetings with Greater Southwest Rotary. Matt did that one on May 7th, and then I was at the downtown Rotary on the 9th, which was last Wednesday.
Are there any similarities in questions that y'all ask when you go to the road or whatever, or you're just grateful that you come, or?
You know, the one that I was at last Wednesday, there's a lot of good questions asked. I think one of them was, for example, what's the long-term prospects for coal generation in this country? It's not really related to what we're doing, but people are asking good questions. I don't remember a lot of questions about opt-in or anything like that.
Well, I was there, of course, I introduced David, our Rotary Club across the street. He did an excellent job. And, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but we're real strict on cutting off the Rotary meeting at 1 o'clock. And he might have still been over there answering questions. I mean, it was just, we just had to stop it because, it was time so he could make the office. But, yeah, there was one I thought was kind of comical, a question about, like they use the analogy of toll road. Like they say, oh, here we toll road, we'll pay it off in 20 years and it'll be free. And then they re-up it and you're still paying. And so this one of our members thought, oh, these fees we had to pay to get into ERCOT, they're going to end in 5 years. And they were explaining to them, the reduction in cost for us for the 5 years and then thereafter and all that. So they were concerned that we were just going to keep paying that money. So I want to stand up and say, yes, the people at LPNL and the board, we believe in raising your rates and spending more of your money. But it was just that skepticism. Some people, no matter what you say, they're going to think something bad's going to happen to them.
I think the one that Matt attended, was the executive at the country club. There was some skepticism there too, wasn't there not?
Yeah, it was. I spoke to the Lubbock Executive Association along with the Rotary and then kind of some smaller groups. LEA traditionally has a lot of folks that had involvement with LPNL in some form or fashion in the last 10 to 15 years, but not the kind of new administration that's been in. And so there's just going to be a lot of skepticism about any solution that doesn't involve just building a power plant. They're kind of just zeroed in on, you build a power plant and then you're set. And so the new market and how it works today is just very different than what they're used to. So a lot of the questions I got at LEA revolved around, I still don't understand why a power plant's not the better way to go. And just reinforcing that, if nothing else, is the difference between debt that goes into your ratepayers' obligation versus something where you get a T-cost revenue coming from ERCOT. So I spent most of my time explaining that. But then in both of them, the second question is not just about opt-in and will we do it, but what does it look like? What does it really mean? Is it exactly like it is in Dallas, or is it what we used to have here? And so just differentiating between what those look like. Those are the two main areas.
What was your crystal ball on coal?
Not much prospect for coal going forward as long as gas prices stay where they are. The fixed cost on the coal plant are so much higher than the
And they're
fixed
shutting
cost
them
on
down,
gas.
aren't they? I mean,
They are.
you're choosing to, just the industry's choosing to get out.
One of the areas.
Prospects are a little better now since some of the regulations have been in.
But one of the things that we have to kind of get over is that they also want to know about ERCOT reliability. That's going to be a big thing that we're going to have to emphasize, especially the next 2 summers, because looking at this summer and next, there are going to be tightening reserve margins in ERCOT. And so any sort of an event or something that happens out there, the public's going to know about it because Dallas Morning News or Houston's going to write about it. So reliability is big, but in explaining reliability, we have to say one of the reasons why there's slimming reserve margins this summer is that 3 coal plants are going offline due to economics. So it all kind of weaves in together that better and more efficient technologies are coming on, but it's causing a tightening the next couple of years.
So that's it for my report. Unless y'all have any questions, Betty?
Any questions for Doug? Good report. Thank you, Nancy. Let's go to item 8, presentation discussion of financial and capital statements, financing options, audits, and financial policies of Lubbock Power and Light, relating to debt issuance issues, reserve account funding, cost allocation, revenue and expense projections, purchase power cost recovery factor, and customer metering, billing, and service issues. Is Mr. Bertram, are you going to?
Yeah, I was just going to state that we're going to give a little bit of abbreviated financial presentation today since we have the larger budget presentation to go through. So Chad's going to talk for a little bit about the pass-through because we have set a new pass-through rate for the summer months.
Okay.
Before he gets up there, though, I wanted to bring up one issue that I wanted to address with you. We are, as you may have noticed, we don't have the advanced metering infrastructure or the billing system contracts on today's agenda. We are very close. We are very, very close on 3 of the 4 contracts. We have one more contract with the AMI vendor that we hope to have finished in the next week and a half or so. What we would like to do, and I wanted to check with the board, we would like to have a meeting towards the end of the month, the last week of the month, to be able to get all 4 of those contracts in place. Not only to go and get those projects started, but the vendor for the billing system has their pricing is only good through the end of May. They took a great deal of time on getting their contracts to us. They gave us a very limited amount of time to go through those contracts, but we've been going through them very diligently in full force for the last month, I guess. And so I was wanting to throw that out to see if there's any availability for a board meeting that last week in May. I believe Memorial Day is on the 28th, so the 29th, 30th, or 31st would be the dates that we would like to do that, assuming we can get everything wrapped up, and we'll let you know in short order if it looks like that's going to change. But I wanted to run that by you guys to see if that would work to have a last week maybe board meeting.
The later, the better for you?
I think any time that week would work for us. Our goal is to get it wrapped up. We'd have to have it wrapped up, by the end of that week before to be able to get into your hands for review and all that. So,
Are they confused about who the customer is? Why don't they just give us an extension through our June board?
I feel the same way on that. It's very frustrating. The vendor is a very, very large organization, which it's been a little bit difficult. It's also the end of their fiscal year, and this is a very big deal for them to have this in place by the end of their fiscal year. So they're very, very motivated to get
May fiscal year?
Yes, believe it or not. And so it's a really big deal to them because this is a big contract for them, and so that's part of the pressure here. They have actually, the negotiation of the contract has gone very smoothly. once we finally got it back from them. So things have been rocking along pretty well. It's just we have gotten to this, we were hoping to be able to have it already today, but going through their layers of legal review and it has been difficult to get it all done timely. So
Would it be,
You call it.
would it be possible to have it next week?
I'll say, I don't think so, Mr. Bowman. I think that we're
Because the
still.
first of the month and the last month are always kind of iffy, or at least with me.
Right, and Memorial Day's in there. I think that, I think Andy's right. I think we're pretty close on one of these. And probably certainly two and three of them, but there's one outlier out there that, you know, and that may roll with you. That one may,
Let me throw out a couple dates. We looked at the afternoon of the 25th, which is the Friday. So if we're thinking that we're gonna have everything in by that week, so I'd throw that out for everybody's consideration. Or I could move some things around and do, say, a noon, like that would be that Friday afternoon, I'm sorry. Then 29th, 30th, or 31st, it would need to be like an afternoon meeting,
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, something like that.
I'm good on any of those days.
Okay.
how long do you think the meeting will last?
I think it could be an hour or less for the meeting. We're going to try to really condense the information and not make it overly long. The contracts are very large documents. You know, one of the vendors, if you take all the exhibits and everything, it's probably close to 800 pages. The others are probably less than 100 pages. Some of them are even shorter than that.
Does the Wednesday help you, because Memorial Day is the 28th, then everybody's off, and so 29th, I'll let y'all get back in the office, do what you need to, and do it Wednesday afternoon, does that work?
Really, any of those days would work for us. Especially better that last week of the month, and the 25th we might be able to make work, but I think that having it that next week would give us, make sure we get it back from the vendor.
And Andy, just, we need the vendor needs a day or two before the end of the month to post the signed versions and everything, so really the 25th and the 29th would be ideal.
Okay, Jamie's saying the 25th or the 29th would probably be the most ideal of all those days. Just so the vendor has the time to get it all posted in the,
Before the end of the month.
yeah.
25th.
Either 25th or 29th may be preferable for the vendor.
Okay, Mr. Boatman says he probably can't do the 29th, but, so, unless somebody tells me different, I'm gonna say, let's shoot for the 25th,
Okay.
if possible.
We'll shoot for that, and then if for some reason that's not gonna work.
And wouldn't y'all feel better if you got it wrapped up before the weekend?
Yes, we
Well, a
would.
lot of people probably gonna take off a long
Some people
weekend,
will
right?
take off, I'm not.
We're gonna have to get it wrapped up before the weekend anyway. It just gets it into your hands sooner, because we'll have to get it wrapped up by the Tuesday of that week if we're gonna have a Friday meeting. So,
With
but
Memorial Day being Monday,
we'll,
there's lots of people probably just take Friday off. I'm good.
we'll aim for the 25th, but we'll be in contact, and if that's not gonna
Okay.
work and we have to move to the 29th, we'll let you know.
Okay.
So it'd either be the 25th in the afternoon, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the 25th, or 29th in the afternoon.
That would be, that's what I'm getting, 29th.
Okay, so
That would be
probably-
the 20th.
It could be any time on the 25th.
Well, I have a meeting.
You have a commitment on the 25th.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, well, we'll be in contact and let you know what it's looking like. Well, hopefully we have a better indication, later this week even of how things are progressing. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, I understand people are gonna wanna take off, and I think school ends that Friday. School,
Yeah, probably half days or
but I think we need to get this on the agenda. So,
And why don't you give them one last option to see if they can, I mean, I know they don't want to, but, it's not right for them to take a long time, throw it to you and give you not enough time, and then, bring all the board members in and all that. It's like, who's the customer?
Yeah, we've been working that, and the risk is that the pricing will change, and so we're trying to,
Well, then they'll give us a discount if we approve it this month, is that right?
we'll ask.
I think they've refused to even provide June pricing, I think.
Yes.
It's a
Well,
good,
I mean,
idea.
it's-
That's
it's
correct.
put on the books, you know, it's a sale, it's,
Don't be grumpy.
don't bring him in here, I'll be.
You'll be grumpy.
I'm with you, Mr. Bell. It's frustrating.
We're grumpy already.
Okay, I've got that down, and y'all will let us know what
Thank you.
your, okay. Mr. Kevin, we hashed that, we didn't take formal.
That's correct.
Full
That's
action.
correct. We'll be in touch with everybody on
Okay.
times.
Okay. Mr. Sales, I see you're up there.
All right, yeah. Like Andy said, we're gonna do an abbreviated version. We're really just gonna focus on the pass-through, since we've got, quite a bit to go over with the budget. So, like always, just start off with what do, rates look like for a rate one customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours, and right now we're just shy of $117. And Excel is right at 106, almost 107. And then our state average survey has actually been increasing the last couple months, and they're right at 115. So some good news. We over-collected again in the month of April to the tune of about $1.8 million. Our revenues are coming in right as expected, which tell us that our models are working. Expenses are just coming in less than expected. And so out of that 1.8 million, 1.3 was on the expense side of the equation. And of that, $1 million was related to fuel costs. So we're seeing lower natural gas prices, which Excel has also reported in the news recently. So, you know, we're seeing, I guess, year to date, April this year compared to April last year, purchase power costs are $3.4 million less than they were the same time last year. Fuel is down over $6.5 million, and then that's offset by higher transmission costs and higher production costs. So where we're at right now is a total over collection of 4.1, and then we expect to be over collected at the end of May by about 3.1. So that gives us about 3.1 million to reduce rates going into the summer, which I don't know if we've ever done that since we've been doing this model. So this is the first time we've made it through a winter season without a big surprise. So I'm actually pleased to report that we, you know, stayed within the bandwidth, and we're on the right side of the equation to go into summer. So to just kind of walk you through, you know, obviously we don't have the May bill yet. We will get that in about a month, but we're anticipating, just based on historical information and how May has typically gone, we typically under collect a fair amount in May. And that, if you think about just kind of the revenue cycle, we're incurring expenses as they happen with Excel, but our revenues in May, half of it comes from April. And so, you know, where we don't have as much revenue in May, it works out in our favor at the end of the summer with September. So, so we expect to under collect about $1 million in May, which would get us to this basically 3.1 million over collected. With our intentional under collection, we're expecting, the way the math works, expecting to give back about $3.25 million, which would have us under collected about $180,000. But for all intents and purposes, out of 66 million, that's really a rounding, due to rounding. So, so the current rate right now for residential rate 1 is just shy of 7.5 cents. This would work out to a 5.39% decrease to 7.075 cents. If you work that out on the bill, it saves our customers. If they use that same 1,000 kilowatt hours all summer long, they would save $4.03.
Every month.
All 4 months, yes, ma'am. And just to demonstrate that, this is where we've been. This is the graph I showed you a minute ago, but to break it down, over the winter, the service availability or the meter charge is $8.07. The energy charge, which is the base rate that covers our cost, is $33.81. And then there's the pass-through rate of just shy of $75 to get to a total of the $116.66 that I showed you a few minutes ago. To compare that to what we're talking about here, for the summer, the service availability doesn't change. If you'll recall, in the 17-18 budget, we made the base rate flat for the rate 1 customers so that there wasn't a seasonal differential between winter and summer. And so that 3.3 cents will stay the same. So really the only piece that's changing for the customer is the pass-through, and that's going down. And so that's where we'll see them save the $4.03. So any increase that a customer sees this month or over the summer on their bill will be related to their volume usage, not related to price increases. So that's pretty short and sweet, but that is the pass-through for the monthly financials. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Okay, any questions for Chad? Well, I'll reserve a few questions on the financials until we go to the budget. So
Okay.
I think it's better to go ahead and get into that. So let's take up item 9. That would be the presentation discussion of the fiscal year 2018-2019 draft operating budget, capital program, and rate schedule tariff. I'd remind everybody this is not an action item this month. This will be an action item in the next month's regular meeting where we would actually take action to approve the budget. So this is really this presentation and discussion for the board's information. So, Mr. Burcham.
All right, thank you. One thing I'd like to also point out, you'll notice on your document that it does say draft. There will be some changes that occur in the budget between now and the June meeting. We will be receiving some updated schedule charge information. These are charges for the different departments that we pay services at the city. They have not completed those at the city at this point. So we'll be inserting those into the budget. We put a plug in there for what we think they might be, but we'll get the actual numbers next month. So there'll be a few changes between now and next month. So when you come next board meeting, we'll have a new book for you that will have all the final numbers in it that we'll be proposing to the city council.
Do you anticipate them up or down from what you're plugging?
I anticipate it going down a little bit. Yeah.
So the plug number is,
We've been conservative, yes. We've put what we think the increase will be and maybe a little bit more. We go off, well, really, I don't know if that's necessarily true. We go off of historical growth rates. And so as long as the growth rates continue, that as we've seen over the past few years, and then we've added in some known items that we're aware of. And so, but typically, it's been a little bit less than what we have budgeted. We could be surprised. Anyway, one other thing that you might notice is we've inserted a page into your book on page 9, which is the financial model. When Greg came in today and he opened it up, and my eyes immediately went to the bottom of the page 9, and there was like almost a $500 million number in there. I don't know how in the world that happened. We tick and tie these things, and then I blame it on ISIS or some terrorist organization, something like that. I don't know what happens. Elves break in and change these things overnight. I don't know what happens, but obviously, it's a $500 million number in there is not correct. But the thing about it is, when we make an error, we go all out. We make it big. So. All right. So just for those of you, everybody except Gwen has been through a budget process, but Gwen has already sat through the finance presentation last week. But just to give you an overview, behind the first tab is really going to be the narrative that goes into detail about this year's budget. Behind the second tab is the financial model, and then the rates and staffing and all that information. And it then drills down to the cost center level throughout the budget. It also then, behind the third tab is our capital overview, which just lists out all those capital projects, followed by the detail. So you'll have a large number of pages related to every single capital project in our program. And then we have the tariff after that. We provide you with a clean version and then also a red line version. So if you have any questions about any of it today or over the course of the next month, please contact myself or Chad. We'll be happy to go over it with you. One thing I failed to mention was I wanted to quickly introduce the staff that assists with the budget. Jana Campbell, who you've met before, was highly involved and just an excellent helper throughout, as well as Chad, who manages the budget process and has done a fabulous job. And we have a new member of our team, was Joey Menace, who started with us a couple weeks ago now. And Joe comes to us from the city. He was in the budget department over there. He was their capital program manager at the city. So these three folks, Joe kind of came at the tail end, so he's the lucky one, but Jen and Chad by far carried the load on this budget and couldn't have done it without them. So I wanted to give them thank you for all that. All the other department heads that are here as well, everyone in the organization at the department head level and above is involved with this process. We started the capital program in December, so we've been working on this for a while. The operating budget work we started in March, so everyone's sick of it at this point. But we feel very good about the outcome of it. So what I want to do for my part of the presentation is I'm going to go over some of the more high-level aspects of the budget, the model that I mentioned a moment ago, the new page we've inserted, some of the high-level items that are going to impact the LP&L this next year and the coming 5 years after that. Then Chad is going to go into the details of the next year's budget to kind of help you understand what's going on for the next year. But there's 6 items I wanted to highlight today. First is that we do not have a base rate adjustment in this budget. It's what we had promised you last year, that we had identified last year that there more than likely wouldn't be a need, and as we go through the numbers again this year, it was apparent that that was not necessary. Our capital investment, which is really the main driver of our budget, and you've seen that over the years, the large capital program that we have. Transmission cost of service revenues, which over the next several years will be a new revenue stream that will dramatically impact our operations. We have purchase power costs, which, as you know, with all the changes in the contracts and the move to ERCOT, all of those costs will change every year going forward. So it's a little bit complex when you're trying to put together a model looking forward with all of the changes that we have coming. We also have the hold harmless payments, and we'll illustrate how that has been included in the budget. And then finally, the impacts of opt-in to retail competition. We have that included as well for the most part. There'll be a few expense savings that we haven't incorporated at this time that we'll incorporate once that opt-in study is complete next year. So, the first time I wanted to talk about was not having a base rate adjustment this fiscal year. Back in 2014, we had originally identified that we would need 4 or 5 increases of 5.75% on the base rate, which for each year for the average residential customer was typically less than $2 a month increase each year. But as we proposed last year, the 4th year we only needed a 5% increase on the base rate, and then the 5th year we had identified we wouldn't need any more rate increases. So that has held true. So this coming October 1st, rates will not change due to a rate increase. This is just a illustration of the rates. Chad mentioned this a moment ago. The same components of the bill: the service availability charge, the energy charge, and the purchase power charge. This is the summer charge, so it'll be different come winter time. But you can see the charges are about $112. When you add tax and franchise fee, it's about $120 for the retail customer. All the rates are identified on page 10 of your document. It goes through every rate class all the way out through the program, which at this point there are no increases throughout the remaining years in the financial model. The base rates over time, the main reason for those base rate increases, as you know, are related to the significant capital investment that we have over the near term, and the vast majority of that is related to the transmission build-out. We have about a $537.9 million capital program in this budget, with the vast majority of that being for the 69 kV, the 115 kV transmission loops, and then the 345 kV interconnection to ERCOT. We also have significant upgrades and replacement in the customer information systems. Those are not new for this budget year, but are still a big component of that. Out of the $540 million capital program, about $38 million of it is for the customer service. So it's a much smaller component, still a large dollar amount, but of the total package, it's a relatively small piece. The capital program did increase about $123 million over the prior year. The majority of that's related to that 345 kV interconnection with ERCOT. So that is a change in the budget from what you saw last year. But also, along with that, is that new revenue stream that covers the debt service, more than covers the debt service related to the transmission. The loops that I talked about a moment ago, the 69 inner loop, which is in green, Avenue A to the east, 34th Street to the south, Quaker to the west, and Erskine to the north. It makes up that inner loop. The outer loop is the north loop. On the east loop, 82nd Street with a little leg going down Indiana to 114th Street. And then on the west side, it kind of stair steps up Utica, Chicago, Frankfort, Milwaukee area. So that kind of gives you an idea of where those lines will be. Those all together are about $272 million. Those were in your budget last year. That really is unchanged from year to year, but large part of the capital program. The other part of the transmission build-out is the integration of the ERCOT lines, 141 miles total. Half of that will be owned by LP&L. Our price will be around $200 million for those pieces. You can see that illustrated in the dotted lines on that map. I've identified where each of the major switching stations or substations will be. Ogallala to the north and Abernathy immediately to the north, where two lines will go to, one on the east side of town and one on the north side of town. The Wadsworth line will then wrap around to the south and to the New Oliver substation, and then go to farmland to the far south. So you can see a listing of all of the different transformers, switch yards, single line circuits that'll be constructed as part of that overall program. So the two loops and the ERCOT integration by far are the drivers of this budget. Just to kind of give you an idea of the value of all these to date, we have about $146 million of capital in this budget. Again, you can see the vast majority of it, over $90 million in transmission and distribution, really over $100 million. Then for the 18-19 fiscal year, you can see we have about $150 million. So basically doubling what we currently have on hand for the next year. Again, the vast majority of that in transmission. And then in the remainder of the capital program, 2019 through 2024, there'll be another $240 million of it, but most of that happening in the 1920 fiscal year when we're completing the ERCOT projects. You can see the cash funding and bond funding allocation. Historically, we've tried to keep that at a 35-65 split. Due to the significant increase of the projects related to the ERCOT interconnection, makes it very difficult to hit that 35%. So we are short of that. However, we've looked historically, and on average, we have been spending about $12.3 million a year over the last 5 years in cash funding. Going forward, it'll be over $17 million a year on average that we'll be spending in cash on our capital projects. So even though the percentage has come down, the amount of cash that we'll be spending on our capital projects has actually increased. It's just the size of our overall capital program has significantly increased. And really, when that 35-65 policy, it wasn't really a policy, it was a goal, was put in place, it didn't envision the ERCOT interconnection and the massive amounts of infrastructure that would be required by that. So I think we're still very proud that we're able to catch fund as much as we are able to in this capital program.
Andy, as far as tracking that to our budget summary, the cash funding part of that is in the budget on the fund level expenses is transfer to capital program. Is that?
Yes, sir.
right line?
That is exactly right. So you'll see for this next year, we have 13.9 million basically transferring to capital. And then you'll see around the 12 to 13 million range until we hit 2021. And then it jumps up quite a bit as we've gone through the capital program for the ERCOT interconnection basically at that point. And have more cash available. Those revenues from TCOS are starting to roll in, so we have more cash available to spend on our capital program.
So as far as the total CapEx budget, our forecast just basically includes the cash portion, not the total.
That is correct. You'll find the total in the capital program section of your document, but then the debt service associated with that is in a couple
Yes.
lines up above that transfer to capital
Yeah.
that shows all those cash flows going out.
Right.
And this is the final slide on the capital investment. This just kind of shows what we're doing next year. You see the 97 million roughly for the ERCOT interconnection. We have about 27 million for the transmission projects and substations, either new or rebuilds on all of that. Then we have the next largest is our annual projects, which are just the overhead and underground extensions, transformer, streetlight projects, which are about 8.5 million, and that runs about the 8.5 million each year. And you can just see the remainder of the projects throughout there. This is just a roll up, and the number after each category just tells how many projects are related to each of those topics. We have I'll just point out vehicles is larger this year than what we've seen in past years. We have some of that has to do with a new crew that we'll talk about in a little bit, that we needed equipment for them. We've also taken a new fresh look at the vehicle needs over the long term, and that is about the level that it needs to stay at on an annual basis to be able to turn over the fleet as these vehicles age out. And, for example, if you have a pickup, our average age on the vehicle is 12 years. So to be able to replace all the vehicles over every 12 years and all of our bucket trucks every 10 years or whatever it is, that's about the number that we'll need to see going forward. You'll see a few changes throughout, but mostly around that area.
So we have on most of the vehicles a 10 to 12-year life, not 5 to 7?
That is correct.
Is that
We
normal?
get as much good as we can out of those. So, yeah, that's probably a lot longer than you might see in some areas, but we try to maximize the lives of those as much as we can. We have our own internal fleet group that maintains those vehicles, and
How does that compare to other utilities? Are they in 10 to 12 or are they more 5 to 7? Hard to know.
I don't know. I don't know an answer to that, but we
I think it varies. I think one of the things that helps us is that we don't have a lot of road miles on vehicles. We have a pretty tight system compared to what the utilities might see. We've got a lot of road miles just getting around the system. So.
All right. The next item I wanted to talk about in the overall picture of the utility is the transmission cost of service revenues. These are in the budget. In the top half of that, page 9, you'll notice about midway in that top section, the funding sources, we start out at about $12.2 million a year starting in 2021, and that's the first 4 months of that fiscal year when we'll actually have entered into ERCOT. It'll jump to about $36 million in 21-22, and then we'll be up close to the $45 million range every year thereafter for the most part. So we ramp up pretty quickly as those transmission items come online. One thing that, as you will recall, ERCOT, we have a hold harmless payment to ERCOT, which was $22 million a year, which will be netted out of this revenue. And so if we throw that up there, you can see that that reduces those revenues in those first 5 years. So we will have about I have the numbers written down. About $5 million in that first year. It jumps to about, I believe, $12 $14 million in the next year, and then about $22 million a year thereafter. That'll just cover the debt service related to the transmission assets. And then once those that hold harmless payment is paid off, then we'll really be receiving that extra income that comes in after 2025, I guess, is when we'll have the full revenue start coming in. Next item I wanted to talk about was purchase power and how it changes over the horizon. Up top is the costs each year that we've anticipated. Down below is really is a timeline. So if you can look at it as what we're going to have over certain periods of time. So for example, the full requirements contract with the SPS will end in June of 2019, this next fiscal year. So you'll see that drop off. Then we'll have 4 different supplies of power beginning the 170 megawatt partial requirements contract, the 400 megawatt transition contract, our own production units that will be producing power, and then the Elk City Wind. The partial requirements in Elk City Wind extend well into the future. The transition contract and the production units we are only envisioning utilizing until we enter into ERCOT. So up above, you'll see about $84 million is our estimate for this next fiscal year for purchase power energy costs, energy and fuel. It goes up to about $96.3 million. The only reason for that increase is we use the Energy Information Administration's estimates of what they feel the Henry Hub natural gas spot price will be in those years. And there was about a 12% increase in their forecast for natural gas in that year. So that's the only reason that number is really going up, is related to the cost of the commodity and the EIA anticipation of where that will go. So that will really ultimately depend on where natural gas costs really are. But that it jumps there. Then in 2021, you see it start to go away because the last 4 months of that year, we are no longer purchasing energy in the ERCOT market. That would be assuming an opt-in to retail competition where customers are buying their power for that segment of our population from the retail energy providers. So, and then in 21-22, you see it get down to where we would be really with just the costs related to the SPP customers with that SPS contract and with the Elk City Wind. So around the $40 million range. And the only reason that's increasing it again is because of those forward commodity price increases, or with SPS, really our average increases in costs that we've seen over time. Everybody understand that? The next slide is related to transmission. Now transmission, we will be in the SPP market through June of 21. We will then, there will be we're there through the end of June of 21, but there is a 1-year lag with transmission costs in SPP. So we will actually be paying transmission costs through June of 22 in SPP. We will begin paying for our transmission costs in ERCOT in June of 21. So you'll see for that 1 year period, that 12 months from June of 21 to June of 22, we have significantly higher transmission costs due to the fact that we're paying transmission in both markets. So it jumps to $46 million, then up to $56 million almost, and then we'll get down to the $38, $39 million range that we would see going forward with our partial load in SPP and our partial load in ERCOT.
Andy, we can't recover that. We can't recover that anymore. We're just going to pay.
No, that was part of the contract that we negotiated with SPS when we did the bridge contract. And they insisted as a letter agreement for transmission that we pay the carryover costs. Because the way that it works in SPP is that you get charged transmission based on the prior year's load. Well, we're going to impose load the prior year before we disconnect on the system, and SPS is going to incur transmission costs related to that load in the next year. So we agreed to make that one year carryover transmission payment as we did the bridge contract. And it was a deal killer if we had agreed to that. It was a contested issue with Sherryland when they removed load to ERCOT, and so that's why red flagged it for them in the negotiations.
long have we known that? About this area?
It's January 17th. We finalized that new bridge contract.
The third component of the purchase power is the demand or capacity charge, and we will be with the SPS through the end of, or through June of 2019. Then it will switch over to the partial requirements contract for the long term, and then the transition contract for the 2-year period. So you'll see the capacity charge will gradually come down from 45 to 36 to 31, and then down to the 18 to 20 million dollar range thereafter. Greg had asked a question before the meeting, why are we growing from 18 to 21 million in those few years? We've seen about a 9% increase in transmission cost on the demand cost with SPS over time, and so that's really what's driving that increase. Today, if we had just that partial requirements contract with SPS, we'd be paying about 15 million today. So that 15 million ultimately grows to the 18 to 20 to 21 million in the future. So, we've layered all these things in there, whether that's based on our history with these contracts, and so we're carrying that forward. That may be conservative, it may not be, but we feel like that was the best way to handle that going forward, to make sure that we have identified all costs going forward. So all of that combined together, this is the energy, the transmission, and the capacity. So you can see where next year we expect to spend over 160 million in purchase power. That'll ultimately drop to a little less than 100 million in the 22-23 year before it starts growing with inflation and regular growth in those costs. So it kind of gives you an idea of what's embedded in the model today. On the revenue side, you'll notice that we have, for the first 3 years of the model, we have put in about 169.8 million in revenues, which is greater than the cost in those years. After that, the revenues and expenses matched because we passed through that cost. The reason for the difference in the revenue is because we are keeping those revenues about where they are right today, and the savings from the contracts that we have entered into, we'll be able to set those funds aside and be able to pay that hold harmless amount to SPS, which is about 24 million that comes due in June of 2021. So if you look down at the bottom, the reserve for the hold harmless, next year we would hopefully reserve about 8.4 million, the next year about 1.8, and then 13.8. So that adds up to 24 million. So by the time we enter ERCOT, we would have the money reserved aside to pay for that, and it really didn't impact the customer. The customer didn't see any decrease necessarily. Well, actually, they would have. If you had compared what they would have, if we had stayed with the full requirements contract with SPS and had continued to see the increases we've been seeing there, they would have paid about $35 million more than what we have incorporated in our cost under here, and for those 3 years. So there's a significant difference. So they're really paying about $35 million less in that 3-year period, but we're carving about 24 million of that aside. So we've tried to do it in a way, again, kind of like we did the rate increases, small amounts over long periods of time. How can we set aside that $24 million without dramatically impacting the customer? So that's our plan in this model.
And if the city council approves that, they basically are saying we can reserve that 8 million.
Yes, and we will have addition that Chad will talk about in a minute to the tariff that beginning on June 1st of 2019 through June 1st of 2021, they will allow us to over-collect 24 million in purchase power over that time frame. And then, it'll just be very specific to that time period. And then when that period's over, we'll get back to the regular pass-through of power.
So is it time period, or is it once you hit the 24 million?
It's time period, because really that savings doesn't kick in until June 1st when the new contracts come into play. I didn't think it was really fair to start over collecting before we start achieving that savings on our own. So that's why we kind of were time specific for that. That can change based on the board, but that was our recommendation.
So Andy, the same assumption as far as capacity and all of that. that holds true on the income side for the PPRF for those out years. In other words, we're still assuming 30% portion of income. And
Right. We have, at this point in time, we have not identified how this will impact SP, as customers, how it will impact ERCOT customers. This is just the total cost and the total revenues. Once we really work through the opt-in study, then we'll be able to start identifying cost impacts for our customers. Because, transmission costs will be, some of these costs will be shared amongst all the customers, and some will be isolated between which customers are which grid.
I remember reading something about the franchise fee. So these numbers, just for example, in 2022-23, we've got a PPRF of $97 million and a franchise fee of 11.9. Is that at the per kilowatt hour rate, or is that at the dollars?
We transitioned to a cents per kilowatt hour in 2021.
2021.
And so that allows those franchise revenues to be basically consistent over time.
And neutral as far as source. So we're not piggybacking on dollars charged to the customer, so to speak. Am I saying that right?
The amount paid by the customers for franchise fees will not change. It will not go down, and it will not
whether
go
they were in
either grid.
Sourced in ERCOT or sourced in SPP. That's
Right.
what I'm trying to get.
Right. Either grid, they'll be paying their share.
Okay.
We will pass those charges on to the retail electric providers, or we'll be passing those charges on to the customers within SPP.
That's what I was trying to get.
You switch to a cents per kilowatt hour formula as opposed to a revenue formula.
Yeah. Whether the dollar amount goes up or down.
If you use 1,000 kilowatt hours in SPP, you're going to pay the same thing. Use 1,000 kilowatt hours in ERCOT.
Okay. I'm sorry I got you off track.
No, that's great. Good questions. The last slide I have before I turn it over to Chad is just the opt-in to retail competition. As you all know, this was approved in January for us to study it. The budget does include $500,000 for a transition to customer choice study. So that is embedded in this budget. We've talked about the purchases the purchase of power and how that changes related to the opt-in, as we are no longer purchasing energy in the ERCOT market after June of 2021. Fees and charges in the revenue section drop off to about 30% of what they are today, because at that point in time we'll only have about 30% of the customers that we have today. We are phasing out the production cost centers. And we will be studying that over the next year or two to identify what, if any, of those production units will stay in place. But the budget has envisioned that those will be shut down. We'll be phasing out those cost centers by 23-24 timeframe. And then one thing that is not in the budget is we know that there will be some additional savings in our cost centers in the future years related to opt-in. We haven't layered all of those in. It's not in the scheme of things, it's not a dramatic number, but we do think there's more that we can put into the out years. But wanted to hold off on that till after the study's complete to make sure that we're not jumping the gun on anything like that. So this is somewhat conservative in the out years because of that. So that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of 6 real big drivers and big changes over the next several years in our modeling. And anybody have any questions on that before I turn the presentation to Chad?
Any questions for Andy?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now that Andy's gone over kind of the high level 5-year forecast along with 18-19, I thought I would drill down into 18-19 for the budget that you'll actually be asked to approve next month. So I've got several slides, so just bear with me and feel free to ask any questions as we go along. We always try to start our budget discussion by highlighting how we have basically tightened our belt and found some efficiencies in our budgets. because we know that we have increases in other places, and so rather than just passing along those increases to customers, we always look inward first to see if there's a place that we can find some efficiencies. And so in doing so, we found $1 million this year, about $200,000 related to the KUBRA bill print and statement processing in the upcoming budget. Maintenance is down about $400,000, and we'll get into all of these as we walk through the budget, but just at a high level. And then capital outlay is down about $500,000. And so just to give you some context of, since we've implemented this program, Andy talked earlier about the rate increase starting in 14-15 and how we had a 5-year plan. I thought it was also appropriate to show you how we have cut budgets within our control over that same time period. And so it's ranged anywhere from $900,000 to $2.2 million over that time frame, for a total of $6.7 million from 14-15 through this proposed budget. So on page 12 in your document, you'll see where we'll spend most of our time today. And before we get too far into the weeds, I just want to kind of explain, especially for Ms. Stafford, how this page really works. So the top third of the page is our funding sources or our revenues. The bottom 2/3 is related to our expenses. The middle third is department level expenses. And so all of the folks that we have here, some of our department heads, a lot of that information came from them, and then with the rest being purchase power. And then the bottom is fund level expenses, things like debt, transfers to the city, and that sort of thing. So that's where we'll spend most of our detail today, is walking through that middle third. So just to quickly summarize that page, you can see that our funding sources are actually down about $1.6 million. Department level expenses, we like to break them into controllable and non-controllable, which, how do you define that? Essentially, the cost of fuel to run our power marketing and purchase power are really outside of our control. And so we put that into the non-controllable bucket. You can see a pretty big decrease, just about $9 million, just shy of that. And then controllable is up 1.6. As far as the fund level expense, this is going to be down at the very bottom of that page, is up about $1 million on the fund level, and then total expenses are down about 6.2. The impact on net assets in the current year, 17-18, we were looking at about $1.8 million going to the bottom line, whereas in this budget, it's about $6.4 million. So on the department level expenses, this is how we break it down: compensation, benefits. In the city's budget, supplies is really just one line, but we've broken it out into supplies, fuel, and purchase power costs, because if we don't do that, purchase power costs really just kind of dwarf the other two, and you can't really see what's going on with those two categories. Then we've got maintenance, professional training, other charges, scheduled charges, and then capital outlay. And so at that, we have about a $7.3 million decrease in department level expenses, largely related to purchase power and fuel. So when I back out those two that I've highlighted in blue, that really leaves us with our controllable costs, and you can see that we're up about $1.6 million. And so I'll walk you through each of these changes, or at least the big ones, to show you how we got from 17-18 to our number for 18-19, and really what those big drivers were. So compensation and benefits is up $907,000, and so if you look kind of in that middle third section, in 17-18 for compensation, you'll see that it's about $16.1 million. And then for 18-19, the number's just over $17 million. And so I wanted to walk you through what were the big things that changed that got us from 16.1 to just over 17 million. And so we've included a merit raise for all employees. It's basically a bucket of 3% for everyone, but that doesn't mean everyone will get 3% since it's based on merit. But when we rolled that in, that's about $550,000. We also have 9 new employees in this budget, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But just the cost of those employees from a compensation perspective is about $362,000. As Andy talked quite a bit about our capital program, as that continues to grow and we're continuing to ramp that up, the amount that we're charging to payroll went up from 21.2% of payroll to 21.9%, and that makes sense as we expect more of those employees in the transmission and distribution functions to spend the majority of their time, not the majority, but more of their time on those projects. And then finally, overtime is up about $150,000, and that's just based on the expected workload that we anticipate in 18-19. On the benefits side of things, it's actually quite a bit easier to explain because there's such a high correlation with benefits move in the same direction that compensation does. And that's largely related to the relationship between compensation and FICA and Medicare taxes, and then our TMRS retirement. So we see $484,000 increase in benefits, and most of that is related to the TMRS and FICA here, and then workers' comp is actually up $114,000, and that's one of those scheduled charges that Andy talked about, that we don't have all of those from the city, but that's one that actually is complete, and that's a good number. And in investigating that and asking Cheryl Brock, who's my counterpart at the city, that's a pretty big increase. So what was going on there, and the city had actually used some fund balance to pay for workers' comp in 17-18, and that they've exhausted that, and so we essentially had a subsidized workers' comp rate last year through fund balance, and now it's just getting back to more normal levels. Sorry. So additional staffing is necessary as we continue to evolve, and I think everybody but Ms. Stafford has been here and seen a lot of evolution of this utility in the last several years, and so I don't think this will be necessarily surprising. Just a high-level overview, we've added 2 communications positions in conservation and education. Really the idea there is to transition some of that day-to-day communications work to folks that are in-house rather than through a professional services contract. And I do think that it's worth mentioning that the cost of those employees are offset by reductions in that contract in the budget. So that's not a net increase in dollars to the budget, that's actually a little bit of a savings. There will be 3 apprentice lineman positions that will be added really for productivity and safety within the distribution overhead department. Right now there's 7 crews? Yes. Okay. So there's 7 crews within that department, and 4 of them each have 4 members on that crew. 3 of them only have 3. And so what we're doing here is adding a 4th person to those last 3 crews. And that's important because most of the work that is being done by those crews requires a minimum of 3 people. So if somebody's on vacation or they're sick, the remaining 2 really can't do a whole lot of work. And so they're temporarily assigned to another crew until that other person comes back. So by adding this 4th person to these crews, it allows our groups, those 3 crews, to work safely, even when somebody's sick or on vacation, but it also increases efficiency when everybody's there. So, and then finally, there's 4 overhead crew positions added, so essentially a new crew in the department, the distribution overhead department, to help the water fund with their distribution network in the Bailey County well field, and this is discussed in pretty good detail in the narrative, but essentially the Bailey County well field is an extremely complicated distribution network, and the city right now is currently outsourcing that to third parties. And when they started looking at the cost, I think they were originally going to add their own crew, and then they kind of took a step back and said, well, LP&L has the expertise and the ability to do that. And so we've added the crew to help them out, and then they will actually reimburse us 60% of the cost of the vehicles and equipment in this fiscal year, and then 60% of the time for those folks as well. And then moving forward, it'll just be on time spent. So as the crew goes to Bailey County, they will charge their time to the water fund rather than to ours.
What do they do? What's their function
What do you mean?
in the water field?
There's an extensive distribution network out there. It's over 100 miles of distribution line. Yes. Over 100 miles of distribution line up there. It's the Bailey County water field is really a critical water source for the city. And so when they have outages or anything like that, it shuts down the critical water supply for the city. So they've been using contractors to maintain that system. It really needs some upgrades that we're going to do for them in the first year, to put in some fuses, reclosures, and things like that to isolate, better isolate sections of the distribution system that might have problems. So that the whole field is not out at one time. Apparently, wasn't a lot of thought put into the design of that distribution network. We can do some things that are fairly cost effective to improve the life.
Doesn't SPS operate a lot of that system?
No, I think this is owned by the city of
All of it?
Lubbock County. It's owned by the city of Lubbock. I think they're served by a co-op up there, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I know that's quite a bit of distribution.
We're gonna put the overhead in place, but it won't be 100% of the time charged to the city.
No. So what we're going to do is when those crews are here working, we'll cover the time. So it will be an addition of one crew for part of the year, one crew for part of the year for our purposes.
So the city budget won't have the cost of those that contract service in their budget,
Right.
but it will be over here at better skilled people, that type of thing.
They will include a transfer line item in their budget to
Okay.
reimburse us for those costs and equipment costs as well.
I just want to be confident we're getting reimbursed for all
Yeah.
the money we spend. 60% confusion.
And that's the agreement that we've got. We'll have to obviously look at the final budget and make sure that that's what they've done. But that's the agreement that we have offered this time.
The issue of the crew, though, it's a crew that we need anyway.
I think we can get some benefit from having additional people on here. Now, the agreement that we worked out with them is that when they have issues up there, the crew goes there. They don't stay here.
That's first dibs up there.
It's their priority. That 4-man crew will have priority responsibilities up there.
But they will be housed here. I mean, they will go there as needed, with that being their first priority, but they're not going to be living or, doing,
Is most of that field between Littlefield and Muleshoe?
It's between Muleshoe and probably the state line, what it was explained.
So it goes all the way from north of Muleshoe to Farmville, basically.
It actually goes from southeast of Muleshoe. As you're headed to Muleshoe, there's a water station right there on the south side of the highway.
Yeah.
That's probably about the beginning of the water field, and it goes west from there.
Okay. Yeah. I never ever looked at the plat map, so I wasn't exactly sure how far east it started. So those guys are gonna have to drive. It's a little over an hour.
75 miles.
Yeah. Okay.
So when they go up there to work, they'll work 12-hour days, most likely. They'll work 4 days a week, 12-hour days while they're up there doing things. I think the first year there's a lot of upgrades that need to be done to get that field.
So why did, I guess, help me out, how did this kind of jump in our silo if it was under the city's kind of discretion?
You know, they reached out to us. Their plan was to hire 4 linemen and have them working for the city. But they approached us about whether or not we would do it. Apparently they had done this 10 years ago or something like that and didn't get a positive reaction from LPL. So when they approached us with the idea, we sent some guys up there to look at the field. And it makes more sense for us to do the work because we have linemen, we have training programs, safety programs, equipment. The city water department doesn't have any of that, so it makes more sense for us to do that work than just charge the city for the work rather than try to reinvent the wheel.
At a discount rate, it seems like, I'm just having a hard time saying that, there was a little pushback by LPNO from, I guess, a few years ago. What was the reason then?
I don't know the full history on it, I just have heard it.
I think some of the history was that they could never get first dibs on those guys. So if there was a weather event in Lubbock and in Bailey County, then all those guys stayed in Lubbock and worked on the Lubbock system, and they were without any assistance. So I think that was their big concern. That was back in the day when there was a lot of tension between utilities, which doesn't exist today. And so I think if the only reason they think they were interested in going this route was if we were willing to say they have the first right to those folks in storm events, something like that. And another thing too is if there is a storm event at Bailey County but nothing happened in Lubbock, we could maybe send more crews to Bailey County to get them up a little bit quicker. It is a integral part of the water system supply for the city, so it's to all of our benefit to put some attention to it if there's a problem up there. But I think that was the main problem with the history, that there was never a commitment that they would have first dibs on the crew if there's a problem.
And I think just from experience, right when I started, when we had that June 5th storm in 2013, it was a large storm. LPNL actually had to reach out and bring a couple contract crews in, and because of the demand, it was incredibly expensive. And so this was an area that they've got somebody here that can go up there if an event happens, that they're not paying surge pricing on it. But all the other times, these crews are here in Lubbock working on projects we need them to work on. I just remember those 2 or 3 crews we hired in 2013 cost us a lot of money. They were necessary, but just because there was a huge storm that affected the region, it was just surge pricing. And so I think that was what these are supposed to alleviate.
Yeah, and to be real clear too, we're fully allocating all the costs to the water fund when those guys are working. There's not a discounted rate basically for the water fund. They just may not be getting charged 100% of those guys' time, but we think we can use those guys a part of the time on our system. So I think it's a fair deal. We're not giving them, they just don't need somebody 100%. It would be a waste of city dollars to spend 100% on a crew that maybe not be working 100% of the time up there. So it's a good way to bring this in-house, but to share those responsibilities between water and between electric.
See, Andy, you just hit on my concern, because they don't want to hire this crew because it's 100%, yet we're gonna hire the crew, and we won't be 100%. And the idea is we'll use them somewhere. Well, if we didn't have this water deal with them, would we be hiring them at all?
Yes.
That's where I'm coming from.
I think when I was going to mention
Not this year.
we've got more people coming in next year's budget, and that's factored into the forecast, but we've got an aging workforce, and we've got a number of linemen and foremen that are late 50s and early 60s in the workforce. They're going to be retiring in the next few years, so I think to the extent that we can staff up with apprentice linemen, get them trained over the next 4 years, that's the most seamless way to keep our workforce solid over the next few years, rather than trying to hire trained people from the workforce.
I have a question. Chad, on page 12 of the budget, you've got the amended budget of 2017, 2018. On the capital program line, that's what, 14.9 million, almost 15?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we look at the statement of cash flows, back on page, let's see. Page 28. So as far as this year's capital budget, am I reading that right? We expended 9.8 million. That's actual purchases. Now, I know we're transferring a ratable amount every month, but we basically got 9.8 in CapEx this year.
Yes.
Am I good on that?
That's correct.
Okay. So we are 6 months into the year and we've got more than half of it.
Well, so that 14.9, that's the cash funded side of the capital program.
Oh, that's just the cash funds.
Right. So, I don't have the number in front of me, but,
Yeah, you've got 100 and, well, I don't have we have 145 million
So
of capital program that's appropriated to spend this year.
if the 14.9 is 30%, then the total's 45, basically. What would the total be?
I'm sorry, what?
15, be about 45.
What was your question? I didn't follow.
So what I'm getting at is how much of the CapEx budget for the year did we expend?
we've got appropriated, I mean, if you look on page 37 of the board book, we've appropriated 165 million.
Yeah, but that's total profit.
Right.
But if you look on page 39, the cash piece of it, this is not just this fiscal year, this is everything we have appropriated to date. We've spent 4.8 million in cash.
I don't always run around this tree because the bond funding and the cash funding part. So if we were to say that the cash funding was 14.8, and that was supposed to be roughly a third of the overall, that would still be about 45 in total. So if we're at 9.8, we're 10 million and 45. I'll see where I'm going. Right. How far are we in that overall? That's okay. Proceed.
We'll work on getting that number for you.
Okay.
I don't know that we have it with
That's
us
good.
today, but let me see what we can do to come up
I
with
think
it.
what you're driving at is where we at in the program and.
Or we burn it faster or what?
Right.
Right.
And I'll just make this comment, I think, Andy, right, we need to give you all a better presentation of where we are with the program, but the expenditures are gonna be lumpy in this project, because we've got some large expenditures that will hit at certain times.
It's a sawtooth deal.
There's been a lot of work done on engineering up to date, so engineering is 10% of the total project cost. So we've got a lot of projects in the pipeline, but the major expenditures won't come until later on. So when you start a project, you have to have the funds available to start the project, and the actual expenditures will come nearer to the end of the projects.
Because engineering is always the first piece.
A lot of engineering work has been done, but that's the cheapest part of the project. We're starting buying equipment and hiring contractors to go out and do the work. That's when the big chunks of money will come. But I think we owe y'all a presentation on where we're at on the project. We'll do that at a future board meeting. Not June, July. One that's a little less busy as this one has been.
So you're going to show us the details tonight after we approve the budget, is that what I'm just kidding,
Well, we already approved that. The one that we're.
Yeah, right.
It's already been approved. I'm sorry, Chad. I
No,
got
no.
off chasing rabbits.
No problem.
Go ahead.
All right, so just to quickly wrap up, staffing, it's on page, 11 in the budget book document. Sorry, we're going back and forth between documents, but this is budget book. Breaking it down by function, administration increased by 4, 2 of those are the 2 new positions in conservation and education that were offset by cuts in a contract. And then there were 2 that were moved from customer service. You see down here, they went from 124 to 122. Those 2 moved up to administration. One was an account clerk and one was an accountant 1. So I'm not sure how they were in customer service, but we put them in the right bucket, probably where they should have been the whole time. Production went from 37 to 36. There was an engineer that was moved from production to distribution. So you see the -1 and +1 right here, and then here's 7 positions that we talked about a few minutes ago. The 5 new apprentice linemen, a journeyman lineman, and a power line foreman, which would fill out those 3 crews we talked about, and then the 1 crew for the Bailey County well field. So for a total change of +9. Moving on to the fuel line item, walking you through that. You can see by station, Cook Station, we receive all the gas. That's all provided by Xcel Energy as part of the unit contingent agreement, and so there's not any dollars there. But for Brandon and Massengale Station, you can see a significant decrease in both of those for a total decrease of about 3.7. And the reasoning behind that really kind of dovetails in with what Andy was talking about with purchase power. In June of 2019, those will go from being power marketing units, being bid into the market, hopefully making a margin, to being produced, to being used to offset our own load. And so since June is the beginning of the summer season, when we see higher temperatures, we see higher production, that's where we make the most revenue and see the most expense. That will actually be shifted down into our purchase power bucket and instead of this one. So purchase power, energy and fuel, we're seeing lower cost of energy in the SPP integrated marketplace compared to our full requirements contract. So the way that we did that, we broke that down by, we looked at hourly locational marginal prices for the last year, and then analyze that with EIA forecast that Andy talked about, since the fuel cost is a driver of the LMP. And so that resulted in energy and fuel decreases of about $5 million. Transmission we continue to see grow as large construction build-outs continue to occur in SPP, and then capacity is down about 1.5 million. And so the capacity is down because also June 1st, 2019, that 400 megawatt contract begins, and that's the 24 months. And so and the partial requirements contract for 170 megawatts begin. And so we'll be actually paying a lower per kW rate on that 400 megawatt deal than we're currently paying right now under the full requirements contract, but we're actually only going to enjoy those lower savings for June through September. So we won't have a full year of that. In 1920, we'll see the full impact of those capacity savings. On maintenance, we talked about earlier that it actually decreased about 400,000, and this is really primarily due to lower anticipated maintenance at the generating plants. As Andy talked about earlier, we are, at least the assumption until we have better information from the study that we'll be doing this year, the assumption is that these will be winding down, and so we're just going to be cautious in terms of how we put maintenance dollars back into something that may not be there in 5 years. And we also looked at it based on historical spending as well. Offsetting that big decrease in production was increases in transmission and distribution. And as we work through the budget, we do anticipate higher maintenance costs for the overhead lines, substations, and some other structures as we prepare to get ready for the ERCOT move. Professional and training, this one moved quite a bit. We have an ERCOT opt-in study that we've talked about quite a bit today. We've budgeted $500,000 for that. We've also budgeted another $250,000 for an interface study, and if you have a lot of really detailed questions about that, I'll have to defer to David or Blair, but I think my basic understanding of that is we just got to make sure that all of our systems can talk to ERCOT systems so that when it's time to flip the switch, everything's ready to go on that end. I talked about earlier the communications contract and professional services is reduced by $167,000 to fund those two new communications employees in-house. And then we also saw pretty decent savings in the Kubra billing and payment solution of about $165,000. So while we do have $750,000 in new costs in those top two bullets, we've also seen some savings in other areas as well. And then capital.
Back up one, please.
Sure. Okay. And then capital outlay, this is the very bottom line in that middle section. We decreased the production operating budgets by $500,000, just based on kind of that capital investment that we were talking about at the generating plants. We just want to be very judicious in how we make decisions on does it make sense to put a lot of money into those if they're not going to be around in several years. So the fund level is broken down by debt service, capitalized interest.
Chad, real quick, if you don't mind, could you touch on the scheduled charges?
Yeah, and I intentionally don't have a slide on that, and I'm actually glad you mentioned that. Andy talked about earlier, we have a plug in there because the cities, they're just not done working on their scheduled charges, and that's for information technology, that's for telephones, boiler and property insurance. There's several other things.
So the city really sends us what that number is.
That's right. It's
So
part
it's
of
the
their
city number.
right. And so we looked at historically how have those numbers changed over time. I think we went back 7 or 8 years, and based on that, we put a plug in the budget to cover what we thought the scheduled charges would increase just based on history. And so I didn't want to put a slide together to walk you through how we got from the budget last year that is a known to a number that is essentially plugged right now. It will be
Anticipate about 10%.
Yeah.
10% increase.
Yeah,
It's
and-
been there year over year.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty big. But yeah, next month when we have real numbers from them, I will walk you through how those changed and what the drivers were.
What control do we have over that? Really, we get a number. I mean, obviously, if we something always we can challenge it, but has it ever changed, or is it like, here it is? put in the budget?
We mainly review it for accuracy. You know, for example, there'll be some chart, IT will have their total budget, and they allocate, a large portion of their charges based on how many computers you've got, and how many desktops or laptops. And so it's mainly, do they have the right number of laptops or desktops for us? Do they have the right number of networks or Wi-Fi units or whatever, and so we don't really necessarily have any control over how much their budgets are, but we can review it to make sure it's accurate, at least as best as we can.
The same is true for us. I mean, we've got charges that we send to the city, and it's based on a formula that was developed years ago on water meter readers, for example. There's a certain amount of their time is allocated for reading water meters, even though they read water and electric. So that's numbers that we provide to them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Since they have authority over their own our budget, but not theirs.
We provide the same allocated cost.
So do we have the ability to true up, let's say, and I'm making this up, let's say we've got 500 computers, and we really only have 450. Do we have that ability, or is it just, that's how it is? Just curious, I'm not trying to.
Well, I think if there's an error, we'll certainly point it out and they'll fix that, but we don't necessarily get to say, oh, we don't think you should have spent $500,000 on this.
No, I know
project.
that, but let's say there's a formula or some numbers, they say you got this, and you got this, or whatever, and somehow we just say, wait a minute, here's the accurate number.
Yeah, I think we have that ability to do that.
Well, I think it's interesting, you know, the legislature, I don't know what authority or control or what they may do, but it's obvious from those hearings that the state folks are on the warpath about charges, you know, general utilities sending more money than they should be sending to the general fund of city halls. And it was interesting to see, I mean, in the scheme of things, we might be on the low end, I don't know. But
We are, for sure.
it may be interesting to see what happens down the road in that regard with legislation.
Right, and you ran through the numbers not too long ago in anticipation of this hearing, and we're between 6 and 7% of our revenues is transferred to the city, compared to 13% for San Antonio, and Garland's probably in that same category, and Denton. I mean, Austin is a little less than that, I think, in terms of.
Some of them may be kind of headed where we were
Yeah,
back when the
could be.
charter election happened. All of a sudden, gas prices went up and almost went bankrupt. And so it'd be interesting to see what the legislature does about this.
Yeah, and like David said, we're substantially lower than most of these, certainly because they're a higher percentage, and then there's just a higher volume in terms of their budget. I mean, somebody like CPS has 1 million meters out there versus our 105, so it's going to be a higher dollar amount going
Yeah,
over.
just
But
100%.
but I think this legislature, there will definitely be somebody file legislation about capping transfers. Whether it goes anywhere is a different story, but there'll be hearings on it, on discussion.
My only concern about that would be is that you're already limiting property tax increases on those other things. I expect those families to fund required services by the state of Texas.
If you're Austin, you've gotten so far headlong into it, it's nearly impossible to claw back any short length of time.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Okay, so, fund level expenses, this includes, debt service, indirect cost allocation, the franchise fee, property tax that we were just talking about, our transfer to the electric capital program, which is, as Mr. Taylor mentioned, the cash funding side of our capital program, and several other things with the reimbursement coming back from the city, and then we'll walk through those. Well, I guess we won't. I thought I had more slides. Sorry. So I'll walk you through them now. So the debt service is up about 3.7, and that's just related to the new issuance that we did in 2017. Capitalized interest is up $2.5 million. If you'll recall, we're capitalizing interest on all of the ERCOT related work until 21, at which point we will be just paying interest up to that point. But that's also all getting rolled into our TCOS rates. The transfer to debt service reserve, last year we cash funded that with about $1.7 million. We weren't able to do that this year, but last year we were fortunate enough to be able to do that, but by not doing it, we're not harmed in any way. That's actually really a return to the norm to fund that with debt. Transfer to electric capital is down just over $1 million, and Andy talked about that quite a bit in his portion. Transfer to WTMPA is down $1.1 million. If you'll recall, we can't talk about the settlement because we're in open session, just related to the terms of the agreement that they have, but that settlement will be paid off in this fiscal year, and so you see a large decrease, so we're just going back to paying O&M charges for WTMPA.
Well, I think we're budgeting, assuming we're going to be part of whatever it's called, tonight, but that's all we can do at this point, I suppose.
That's right.
And well, ultimately, it's down to like 50,000 a year is what we have in the forward-looking models for a much pulled back version of what we do today. So even though it's in there, it's de minimis.
We have preserved our rights to withdraw from WTMPA and amendment to the OPC to attend as well. Get that option available in the future.
Transfer to debt service fund for general fund CIP is down about $850,000. If you'll recall, there were 3 years worth of catch up that we were paying in 17, 18, and so now this just includes 1 year of basically paying for our portion of Citizens Tower. But there's also how much is it? I lost. I'm just a blank. Asset management. 400 something.
490.
Yeah, there's $490,000 one time to pay for a portion of the city's asset management system. And so rather than us putting in an asset management system and them putting in an asset management system, we're going to fund 35% of it, which in that funding allocation was done by how many departments do we have that will be using it out of the total. And so that was just the agreement of how that would be paid for, and it's essentially just a lot like our enterprise resource platform. It wouldn't make sense for us to have two sets of financial systems, and so the same idea wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to have two different asset management systems. So we're going to piggyback with them on just for the purposes of economies of scale. And then the reimbursement that Mr. McCullough talked about a few minutes ago, just based on several different factors. We have a whole model that puts together how much the city should reimburse us for collections, and basically our customer service department increased from 5.9 to 6.3 million. So total expenses are down 6.2.
Chad, you may have already, I'm sorry.
No.
You're going over that. So the collection part of that on the transfer to the general CIP, the spread of that, our part that's recouped from water and runoff is up in the transfer from other funds.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Then, and I guess what you were talking about on the software part, that's why the transfer goes from 1.6 to 1.1 after 2019.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it's basically 1.1, and then half of that gets recaptured from the other funds. So that's what's happening.
That's right. So on the funding sources, so on page 12, the top third of the page, these are the funding sources that we budget. You can see interest earnings. The big three are basically base rates, purchase power, recovery rates, and then the franchise fee equivalent that we collect and then transfer to the city. You can see general consumer meter is down $1.7 million, and even though we don't have a base rate increase, our expectation for load was probably a little aggressive last year. And as we break down the model in ways that you probably would put you to sleep, but in doing so, we looked at our load forecast, and we had a growth rate in our volumes that really didn't line up with history, and so we brought the load growth back in line with what we've seen more historically. And even though we're seeing lots of new development in Mr. McCullough's report, there's lots of new things being installed, we're seeing a lot more load, but they're also a lot more energy efficient than what we've seen in the past. So our load growth hasn't necessarily seen a lot of growth, even though we're seeing a lot of new construction. So we brought that back in line with what we thought was more realistic and conservative. And so you see that line item decrease. Purchase power recovery is up $500,000, and Andy spent quite a bit of time talking about that. The big one here, power marketing, is down $4.1 million. That has everything to do with the June 2019, us going to the 400 megawatts and then basically producing for our own purposes. And so we see those power marketing units and the unit contingent revenues basically shift down into purchase power to offset those costs. One that we'll talk about when we get to the tariff is the fees and charges. Is actually down $200,000, and that's due to the elimination of the payment arrangement fee. If you'll indulge me, we'll talk about that when we get to the tariff in a few minutes. And then the transfer from the debt service fund, this is just so that we can, there's a number that's exactly the same on the fund level expenses down below. It's really just there so that we can make the transfer between funds. And then the transfer from other funds that you talked about a second ago, Mr. Taylor, was the money that we received back from the city for our portion of the billing system and Citizens Tower. So those are the big ones. Let's see. Got a little ahead of myself. I basically walked you through every single one of those, I guess, from memory. So I'll spare you watching me read all of those bullet points. So if you don't have any more questions on the operating budget, starting on page 183 is where you see the red line version of the tariff.
I'm sorry, 183?
Yes.
Okay.
The clean, I think, is on 135, but the red line version starts on 183. So on pages 187 and 188, as we look at new customers when they request service, if we require a deposit from them, the deposit will essentially be will be the greater of $135 or 1/6 of a good faith estimate of that customer's annual billings. On page 194. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the pass-through discussion. We eliminated the seasonal differential for rate 1 in 17-18 budget to provide more predictability for our customers, or our residential customers. And so we're doing the same thing here with our rate 3, which is the residential electric heat customers. And so we've made sure that it's revenue neutral. And so to walk you through that quickly, this first column is how the rates work now. In the summer, the average residential consumption for this rate class is 951 kilowatt hours. Their base rate is almost 5.3 cents. And you can actually see this. Sorry to make you flip back and forth. This is on page 10 of your budget document. You can see in 17-18 how we've changed it from a seasonal differential to a flat rate. The service availability charge is $8.07, and then the energy usage works out to just under $50 for a total impact of $58.68. There's 4 months of that being in the summer, so it's about $235. Under this new rate, the 2922, you see the service availability charge and the energy usage. It's all multiplied out over the summer. It's about $146, which saves them $22.18 over the summer, and $88 if you multiply it by 4. Doing that same exercise over the winter, this would actually raise their rate in the winter, just like it did with rate 1, and it would cost them annually $88.72 over those 8 winter months. But when you net that against the summer decrease, it's effectively $0 impact to the customer over the year. It just makes their rates a little more predictable over the summer. On pages 202, 205, 207, and 212, this is the demand cap. So basically all of our customers that use demand meters, this affects them. And essentially the existing rate design really incentivizes inefficient use of our system. And the demand cap, we've been phasing it out for 3 years. This will be the 4th. And we'll continue to do this until all of those customers are paying for what they're using. And I'll walk you through how it works. But by doing this in phases, we're making sure that no customer sees more than a 20% on their bill related to this change. So just a hypothetical example for a customer that uses just shy of 125 million kilowatt hours and imposes demand on our system of 3,672 kilowatts. The current demand cap is 50, and so when you divide that 125 million divided by 50, you get the 2,496 kilowatts. So they're actually being billed for 2,496 kilowatts, even though they're using 3,672. So by us changing the divisor there in that equation from 50 to 42 hours, what they pay would go from just under 2,500 kilowatt hours to just under 3,000. So it's certainly a move in the right direction, but it's ensuring that they don't pay more than 20% on their bill related to that change. So how has this worked since we started doing this? This is our 4th phase of it. You can see in 15-16 when we started it, we had 753 customers that were essentially not paying full freight for the demand that they were putting on the system. And in 18-19, we expect it to be just over 500. So we've reduced it by a third over those 4 years. On page 227, we eliminated the payment arrangement fee, and it's really with the idea of just trying to be more customer friendly and realize that some of our customers don't have access to certain technologies, and so by asking them to go online, they weren't penalized if they could do it over the phone through the IVR system or online, but if they had to go through a customer service representative, we were charging them $30. And so really what we're trying to do is we are trying to be more customer friendly, and we just removed that so that all customers, regardless of their access or abilities with technologies, are treated the same way. On page 227, the meter testing charge, the customer can request a test of their electric meter every 4 years without a charge. If they request a test before that window is closed, we can charge them $50, but we don't necessarily have to. I feel like I'm missing something with that.
The change there, though, is, right now, we charge $50 if they request a test. So this is a little bit more customer friendly as well, where
So it's permissive, but not mandated.
Right.
We changed it where it's consistent with PUC standards.
Right. And this is, I realize that 2 of you were here for the meeting last week, and this was a slide we accidentally left out. But on page 228, there is an alternative meter charge. As you're all very well aware, we are moving to advanced meters. And essentially what this does is it gives our residential customers the choice to say, I don't want an advanced meter. I would like to have a non-standard meter, but it also, there's a cost that comes with that choice, because we incur costs to service those non-standard meters and provide non-standard processes that otherwise wouldn't be required. And so the installation cost at each location will be $127.84, and we'll make sure that that's paid before installation. And then moving forward, it's a monthly charge of $24.56 that will be added in addition to whatever their regular rate 1 or rate 3 charges are.
And why would
That first
somebody do that?
installation charge only applies to new customers. The existing customers already have the meter in.
The installation fee would be charged when if a customer does not want the advanced meter and they want us to put on a regular meter.
But they already have it though, Andy.
They won't though.
But we're swapping everyone out.
We're putting everybody on the advanced meters, and then if they want to change to a different style of meter, then that charge will
So
come.
all the meters are gonna go away, existing meters are going adios, zero.
Right.
So you either get the advanced meter or the non-standard, and it'll cost you to have it and then a monthly charge.
That's correct.
So we're upgrading all of the meters in the system. Only those customers that, for whatever reason, say, I don't want to have a communicating meter, I want a non-communicating, non-standard meter, then this will apply to those individuals. And we're doing it based off the cost of service to still manually service those meters, and it's also falling underneath the general PUC guidelines for
Well,
non-standard.
I understand the monthly charge for the standard meter, but if you don't have to do anything, are you gonna charge them $127 anyway?
Some of those meters are probably aging out anyway.
This is just
It's the
for
same meter will stay in.
This is just
I mean,
for.
But I think Don's saying that they already have an existing meter, so.
They just don't wanna change
I think
to
there was an
advanced.
issue with the installer though, right, on this, that we're asking the installer to put the AMI everywhere.
Yes,
throughout the
because we have to
system.
have the opt-out. They won't receive that until. Our intention moving forward is to upgrade the entire network and the entire system. And in order to have the AMI function best, we would need all of the meters changed out. And so that's why we're changing it. The new standard meter for us will be an advanced meter. So if a customer is looking to opt out of that advanced meter, that's where the fee comes into play.
But you're not doing anything. I mean, they've already got the meter installed, you just don't touch it. Is that not right?
I think the issue was with, the pre-notification versus the installation, that was wasn't there a discussion on that? Because the installer is going to be installing the new meters across the board. And so then, at that point, was when the customer would be making the decision whether they're going to keep that or go to a regular.
The only way around that would be to stick something in the bill.
We would have to have a system in place to get advance notification, to tell the
Well, that's
vendor
what-
to
yeah.
not do it after. I think the cost of getting it done was more streamlined, just to have wholesale everything replaced
Correct.
and then come back and change those meters out if they don't want
I
that.
think you're gonna get considerable pushback on that.
Well, if people are given a deadline to opt in, whatever you want to call it, to keep their old meter, and they see it's going to cost them $24.50 extra a month, which is very fair.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, I'm talking about the installation charge.
Well, they wouldn't have it if we allow them to have a deadline that they could notify.
And it's not just the
That's my
installation,
point,
it's
though.
the cost.
What I'm hearing is,
It's additional.
everybody that opts out is gonna have to pay the $127 the way you're talking about now.
Correct, that they can put a new,
Is that not right?
different type of meter.
Well, people are moving all the time around, it makes sense to me.
They are, and
We're
our
not-
costs
we're
here
not
are not
changing
necessarily
it. We're
driven
not
by
keeping
whether or not you have a new meter or not. It's the fact that that non-standard meter, we have to go manually service it every month. So there's an initial charge and then an ongoing, but whether they kept their old meter or have a new meter that's not communicating doesn't necessarily change that cost of service up
We're
front.
not.
Just a question.
Yeah, my first blush is thinking like you, the more I think about it, it makes good sense to replace it.
And one of the things that we get from individuals that have already said that they don't want to participate in this program is, why don't you require an opt-in?
Would it be better
program?
called a non-installation
And
charge?
there's no mechanism to do that that would not be just the financials would just not work on.
Mr. Buckman, we'll look at that and
Well,
we'll come back with some options.
I'm thinking of it from the customer side.
I think you're right. I think we can get a lot of complaints about that from the people that we already know are going to opt out.
Well, yeah,
We have-
and I know it's
going to be
coming.
We expect a very, very small amount based on historical figures. We're talking less than 100 customers in our entire population. So this is based on actual numbers from other Texas electric companies, it's been a very, very small number of people that actually opt out.
I think a whole lot of these people that have been raising cane on this for the last several years will change their mind. They'll squeal about it, but they won't do it. They'll go ahead with the automated meter to 24 hours a month.
That's right.
We'll take a look at it and see if there's some options.
Well, but I think some of the meters, let's say there's 100 people on keep, the meters they have are old, and you can't just, those things are phasing out. They will become dinosaurs over time.
All of those, yes, will still be
Is that
changed
correct?
out. You're absolutely correct.
Everyone will have a new meter, whether it's
Yeah.
NMI or not.
And again, a lot of this project is across our system to upgrade all of the meters. The question is, are there some individuals that want a non-communicating meter versus not? So part of this is, to your point, we have a lot of meters out there that folks might say, I like the meter on the back of my house, but it may have been out there for 30 years and it's not functioning up to a quality that it should be. So it still needs to be replaced for accuracy's sake, but if they don't want to communicate, that's where this comes in.
I think where you're gonna sell the new meters eventually is you can read them digitally, but when somebody can have an app on their phone and know when it's running every day, and they're saying, uh-oh, it's up, just put on your ice in the window and we're not gonna run it as much. I think that eventually that will get there, real time knowing.
It will, and.
So you'll have a few that are going, don't change, it ain't broke, I'm
Sure.
fine.
And even before we get to that point, almost immediately, customers that call in and are questioning the accuracy of the meter, we can register it right there and show, this is what I see on my end, this is what you see on your end. And we also, our CSRs have more of the ability to go through and look at patterns and say, okay, you say you don't know why your bill went up. We see that there is a decrease when you're out of town, but there was a spike when you got back in. Is this when you got back
When
into
your
town?
family came in
And it
and
allows it back and
everything
forth with the
was
customer to instill some confidence that there's some science behind it.
Additionally, the outage notifications as well as the very quick turnaround when it comes to reconnection of service, whether it be for power outage or for move-in, move-out type situation, the individuals that have the advanced meters will benefit from those really quick turn-ons. Where a customer who's
I think if
opting
you come
out.
up with all the advantages
And
of the
yes, and
advanced
that's
meter,
on
to
the-
say, here's why you don't have the $24, you get your outage faster, and da-da-da,
Definitely.
that will lessen the people that are gonna hang on.
And Ms. Gafford, we already have a website out, a page on our website around that, dedicated to those basic benefits of AMI. And as we get closer to going live, we'll have things that are more targeted to our exact system. But right now, since about last June, we've had that page, we've updated recently. And so,
And it's actually listed here,
Yep.
on our,
sorry.
You'll have some people that just don't want to change, contrarian stuff.
sure.
And every system does, and you just gotta make sure that there's an avenue for them to do that.
All right. Last thing, is, Andy talked about this, during his portion of the presentation. It's on page 229. Essentially allowing us, through the purchase power recovery factor, to waive the balancing cap for a very specific time frame of June 1st, 2019 through June 1st, 2021, which perfectly coincides with that 400 megawatt contract. The balancing cap will be raised from a dynamic 12-month rolling forecast to $24 million, and will allow us to save, will allow us to set aside the $24 million for the hold harmless payment due to SPS on or about June 1st, 2021, rather than debt funding that, paying it through cash. So that's all I have. If there's any other questions?
Questions? We pretty well peppered Chad with questions and we went through all that. All right, let's, Kevin, do I need to wait until Mr. Conrad returns to the room before we go to the next item?
The minutes we prepared will not reflect the in and out of the recording.
Well, I saw you look at Miss,
I thought the rule was once upon a
No, you can lose it in session.
I saw you looking, Ms. Henry, if you got it.
So
Okay.
don't do all the interviews. We'll be.
I realized when I went out to make that phone call then
That's
that,
what happened, you have a lot of interest.
well, I've heard you over here sign, so. I'm ready to go.
No, he was snoring.
That was a strong.
We gotta go away.
They've already expressed their
Well, I know,
He
but
probably
he didn't,
learned loose.
I didn't see him go by as if he was going by. So Robstown, I can make it to Robstown at 7. I will be one of the
Getting smarter.
Is there anything in Houston on this? Okay, all right. Now we're ready to take on the consent agenda. So I will briefly enumerate and explain each item. Item 10 is to consider resolution authorizing the purchase of the mobile substation, which we've talked about in the past. The detail of that's in your materials. Item 11 is to award a contract to L. Howard Construction for the evaporation pool closure at the Cook Station. Item 12 concerns purchase of transformers from Texas Electric and Wesco Distribution. Item 13 concerns substation relay panels that we would be purchasing from Electrical Power Products, Inc. Item 14 concerns the purchase of overhead shield wire and conductor cable transmission lines from Wesco Distribution. Item 15 would be for overline tubular steel poles from Annixter, Inc. Item 16 would be the purchase of network power transformer from Cooper Power Systems. So I'll entertain a motion on those, unless someone would like to have any or all of those pulled for individual discussion.
Chairman, I would move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded to approve items 10 through 16 as stated. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by nay? There are no nays. So all of those items are approved. And that would bring us to item 17, which is to...
Before you do that,
I believe we're out of the agenda.
no, you hadn't said adjourn yet. I just wanted to thank everybody. I know this budget is, it's so massive, so lots of money. I know there's a whole lot of work that goes into it, and we don't see any books.
Oh, yes.
I meant to say thank you a while ago when Chad finished, but it's not too late, Mr. Chairman. That's already did it.
Yes.
Welcome to the new man out there.
And one other item, learned from Councilman Chavez, Mr. Rodriguez is in the hospital. And he's suffering from some health issues. and was not able, and apparently he's been in and out of the hospital a few times, and that was why he wasn't able to join us last week. So I would ask that you keep him in your prayers and your thoughts.
You also said, Greg, he's in intensive care right now.
I believe that's right. He's in intensive care.
Back in intensive care.
So that would be the effectual fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. That's James chapter 3. So it's always a good thing. All right, that would bring us to the close of the meeting. Appreciate everybody.